let's continue our next session. And welcome to the stage, Mr. Jaime Andres Galindo, Action Research Coach at the Centro Colombo Americano in Bogotá, Colombia.
Thank you very much. So it's great to be here. Thank you.
Thank you. All right.
All right. So in the current times of pandemic, it's great to be here, sharing some knowledge, some ideas. I'm glad to be here participating in this great opportunity for us to get acquainted with some assessment processes. So let me share my screen to start my presentation. Give me just a second. One moment here. Like open my presentation. A second here. Okay, very good. All right, so the name of my presentation is CAF, Upgrading Speaking Assessment Paradigms. And it's basically a little bit of research report, pedagogical experience, in which I want to show you how something theoretical merely became something more practical in our institution. In a moment, I'll explain what CAF stands for, which is the topic of the day. And my name is Jaime Galindo. I work at Centro Colombo Americano as the Corporate and Government Programs Leader. So I like to start by showing you the agenda that I'll manage in the presentation, in which I'll start with an awareness activity sample. Then I'll go with a little bit of an explanation about what CAF stands for, a reflection about that framework, the application or strategies that maybe you could use in your context, some conclusions, and some references for you to continue doing some further research. So first of all, I like to start by contextualizing or talking about my context. At Centro Colombo Americano, we have formative assessment, and that implies a lot of ongoing feedback, a lot of conversations with students, telling them how they're doing, highlighting weaknesses and strengths. But when you are assessing speaking and you are doing it through formative assessment, we might have some challenges. Basically, how do we assess, or what do we assess? And how do we make sure that there is no disparity between one teacher and the other? Because when we are posed the question, what to assess in speaking, on when we are in front of a student and we have to assess speaking, we might have different perspectives and beliefs about them. Indeed, that's what happened when we ran a little test. What we basically did as an institution was to ask teachers, to a group of teachers, to listen to a speech sample in order to answer these questions that we have here. In what proficiency level would you place the student? What criteria did you use to determine his level? And how do you usually assess oral performance? And what we discovered was a wide range of answers. We would see teachers who would place a student or that specific speech sample in a B1, another one in a B2, and they said B1 because of the fluency. Another teacher would say, well, grammatically wise, I would say B2. And when we ask, how do you assess usually the oral performance of students, we could find a wide range of perspectives, beliefs, techniques, because when you use summative assessment, it might be a quiz that usually, if it's automatic, it gives you a picture of the speaking of the student, or if it's through a specific assessment grid or assessment technique, you can get some results. But when it's formative and it's ongoing, and you are asked to assess the oral performance of a student, you might start implying or using your beliefs, using your perspectives. And that's what we notice here, a wide range of scattered results, opinions, perspectives. So that's when we also, through our supervision system, we observe classes and we try to find what the picture was in terms of those beliefs, in those criteria that people establish for oral performance. What we could find is that accuracy was the most favored component. In what sense? In the sense that we have a tendency to correct grammar and correct pronunciation. And it's a really, really strong let's say, teacher reflex, it's natural that when a student is making a mistake, immediately we correct it. If that is our style, some people write it down, but we saw a tendency of overanalyzing, overcorrecting grammar. And that's not bad, but that disregards other areas. And I feel that that is one of the first questions that I have for you today. When we are in the classroom, are we overanalyzing the grammar of a student or the pronunciation to the extent that we don't open up for fluency or for other aspects that also require attention in the feedback process? The second,
such an interesting question. Let's give some time people to answer it. In the meantime, sorry to interrupt you, people would like to see the presentation full screen because they're not seeing the slides, so you know. Sorry to interrupt you.
I'm sorry, I didn't know that. So how do I thought I was sharing my presentation. Let me see.
Yeah, you are, just that they want to see it the full screen, the full presentation in full screen, and okay, as you are moving through the slides. That's it. Sorry for the interruption. Come back to your question.
Is it now visible, full screen?
I'm sharing it right now.
Okay, I guess now it's full screen. If not, please let me know. I thought it was full screen. I'm sorry about that.
Not yet.
Yeah. Not yet? But it says that is sharing my, it says it's sharing my current window. So I don't know why it wouldn't be, and I'm using PowerPoint, so I don't know if I'm clicking in the wrong place.
Okay, let's see.
Let me stop sharing and let me reshare. Maybe that works. And let's see, compartir pantalla, ventana. There is my PowerPoint. I click big presentation. Could you see it big? That's really strange that you don't see it big.
Yeah, we still see you. We still see the slides and like all the slides on
small format.
Yes, that's right.
That's really strange. I'm sharing the like. So I guess it's okay. We keep it like I'm sorry if it's not full screen. I'm sure I'm clicking full screen. What slide do you see currently, or what are you watching right now?
Observations. Accuracy was the most favored component. Okay. Fluency was misunderstood.
Okay. Yeah, if it's okay, I will continue doing it like that because I click full screen and it doesn't go full screen and I'm not really sure what's going on.
Go ahead. So, if everyone agrees, let's continue because you were asking these wonderful questions for brainstorming. And then in the meantime, I'll ask around. Is that okay, Jaime?
Okay. And let me know, please. It's okay if you interrupt me because I'm not watching the chat right now. I'm just watching the presentation. So let me know. So, okay. So the question was like, are we really favoring just grammar and focusing so much on pronunciation that we disregard other components? And this is a question we should ask about our own classroom. And the second finding in those observations was the fact that fluency was misunderstood. Most of the time, it was misunderstood by the teacher or the student in the sense that sometimes it was about speaking fast or not speaking slow, and there are many components that are included in fluency. Fluency was determined as the least promoted and evaluated when we observed teachers and what they could do in their practice. Fluency was one of those features that was not really taken into account as grammar and pronunciation in the feedback practices. Complexity, or the concept of what is complex, was mostly based on advanced language. The teachers promoted a lot of advanced language to make students speak with a little higher complexity. And also syntactic variety was disregarded due to the fact that there was a focus on the grammar studied for that week, for example. And I feel this has to do with a lot of that linear approach that a book has, that you go from verb be to simple present to past, and you have a linear approach in your teaching so that at some point it's difficult to combine, it's difficult to, it's okay to recycle and it's possible, but having a syntactic variety might pose a problem. So when we saw such a wide range of perspectives and these observations, I had a click moment, that moment in which mentally I could connect something that I had studied in a previous study in my master's degree and this situation. And it's the concept of CAF, which stands for complexity, accuracy, and fluency. When I had studied CAF, I noticed that it was mostly a coding, let's say, approach. It was mostly using quantitative research to analyze written samples and spoken samples. So basically what I did in my study was to analyze some written samples and spoken samples and see how complex that speaking was, how accurate, how fluent. And I found a million formulas. Just to give you an example, in fluency, there is a formula that analyzes the number of syllables that a person produces in a minute. Or there is a formula that counts how many silence moments you have in a sample of a speech. So this was very heavy, very theoretical, mostly formulas to analyze speech. So when I saw that, let's say, situation in the institution of that wide range of perspectives, I said, why not to translate these formulas of quantitative research that I use in my previous studies into something practical that could give ground for teachers to see speaking not only from the grammar-oriented perspective, but from a whole perspective and including a holistic approach for assessment. So that's when I analyzed how to translate that theory-heavy formulas into speech analysis with some pedagogical implications, looking at some authors who could help me in that translation of theory. That's when we came up as an institution with some sort of definitions. So to help teachers, to give them a framework where they could stand and they could really, let's say, provide some strategies to students, or let's say feed their teaching with different components, complexity was defined as syntactic variety, different grammar tenses, and grammar recycling. Lexical resource was defined as the appropriateness for the context and precision. In this one, I would like to give you just a very simple example with the expression go the extra mile. When we say go the extra mile, we know it's it's an idiomatic expression to show that you're making a big effort. So you can say, I will go to work and I will go the extra mile. But when a student says or uses this expression in a context that is not about that, it might sound strange. And we observe, actually, it's particular in some classes, that when you learn an idiomatic expression, and it happened to me as an English learner, I have a tendency to use it all the time for many different contexts. And nobody corrected me. I was happy using my new idiom, my new phrasal verb. And this item of lexical resources when to use it with precision in the accurate context. Lexical range, we defined it as upgraded vocabulary, idiomatic language, synonyms, circumlocution, or similar strategies. And finally, we have discourse organization, which is argumentation, expansion, details, and other examples. So this framework gave the ground for teachers to see complexity not only as advanced language, because when we say, please make sure that the student reaches advanced language, we might just stay there and around that specific concept, advanced language. But what is it, advanced language, or what is it, what we do? Well, as I said, naturally, we have a tendency to give advanced expressions and advanced vocabulary. But with this little framework, we can notice that there are more concepts that are linked to complexity. The second one is accuracy, which is mostly focused on grammar correctness and intelligibility, and is the one that, as I said, we try to favor the most sometimes. We are really into looking at mistakes and correcting them immediately, or many other techniques. That is accuracy. Fluency, as shown in the observations, was the most misunderstood. So we created some definitions as well. For example, what's fluency? Fluency is the reduction of these fluency markers. That means helping students reduce or creating strategies that help reduce the number of fillers. Fillers is basically when students make that sound pet words when we use a word too much actually, I mean, hesitations when we hesitate to say a word, I go, went, repetitions when you repeat words, silence, or Spanish in our case. In your cases, it could be the mother tongue of students. So fluency, when we make it a strategy and when we translate those formulas into fluency, is basically reducing those moments, for example. Another part that is important is organizing the stream of thoughts that you have, not repeating the same idea, which is a little connected, or actually a lot connected, to complexity, in the sense that you have to organize your ideas. If you say the same over and over, but you don't say anything at the same time, you are being disfluent because you're not making sense or you're not organizing your idea. We also have the concept of interactional strategies to favor the flow of the conversation. We have a tendency to analyze fluency individually, but if we are following a communicative approach, if we are in a speaking context in which you interact, you also need to favor strategies that create follow-up questions, two-way questions, and strategies that allow fluency in a two-way, let's say, exchange. A regular pace, like to, let's say, eliminate the myth that fluency is speaking fast or not speaking slow, or like, it's a regular pace. It's not really about speed. And that's kind of like the point with that definition, not too fast, not too slow. And suprasegmentals play an important role in fluency, because when you have thought groups, linking, reductions, fluency takes a different aspect. So what I want to show with these definitions of complexity, accuracy, and fluency is basically the fact that it's different if we provide a framework for teachers to see specifically the concepts so that they come up with the strategies, or they basically give a name to something that they naturally do. Because if you think about it, we all do advanced language, syntactic variety. We also teach linking. We teach communication strategies. So it's not the fact that teachers don't do this. It's the fact that when you provide a framework and you provide concepts, you are able to give teachers that, let's say, spark for them to start connecting strategies to concepts and replicating strategies, finding strategies, analyzing, speaking in a way that they do not leave aside one specific area. So when we thought about how to make this possible in the classroom, I want to show you some strategies that, after we presented these concepts to teachers, they started finding strategies, which was very interesting for me, because let me show you this discourse organization. It's called the strategy Oreo. So the student gives an opinion, a reason, an example, and an opinion about something. The name Oreo, it's of a cookie, it's of easy retention. It allows for basic or advanced students. And to give you an example of a basic course in which we said to a student, or we asked, what's your favorite TV show? The student said, my favorite kind of TV shows are documentaries. I often watch them on weekends. That is the opinion. What is the reason? I like documentaries because they are beautiful. What is the example? For example, from National Geographic are nice. And restate the opinion. Documentaries are very good. As you can see, this is a very simple discourse organization strategy that could be applied in a basic course, and that was triggered by showing the teacher that he or she needed to implement these course strategies. Other teachers found strategies like area, which is probably a strategy that you already know. Area, A stands for answer, R stands for reason, E, for example, A for alternative. So it's another way to organize discourse, but it's a discourse organization strategy. It could be even more advanced, like this one that some teachers call the argumentation process. And it's like basically giving expressions to start the opinion as far as I'm concerned, to give a reason due to the fact that, example, for instance, a different point of view, nevertheless, to conclude all things considered. And if you see, these are strategies that could be treated in a class. How about if instead of overcorrecting grammar, we take the whole session to teach one of these strategies and teach students how to go through them and to organize their thoughts in a way that their speech is more complex. And the same applies for fluency. When we talk about fluency, basically, we could say that if we teach students and teachers have clear the concept of what is a filler, what is a repetition of words, what is a pet word, they could, for example, show a video on the street video and ask students through a little chart to say what the number of fillers is in the video of that speaker, or how many times he repeats actually, or if there is an evident, if the person is answering the question or only going around ideas. So these are just a couple of strategies that came up when we showed that framework to teachers. And similarly to this, teachers were creating and sharing, and that's when I say that translating this theory of formulas and really heavy stuff provoked that teachers knew the concepts, had the holistic view of oral assessment, complexity, accuracy, and fluency, and could come up with really great strategies. They were not reinventing the wheel. We're not reinventing the wheel. Again, we're giving the ground for people to create banks of strategies that are placed according to a concept. And that is really important in the teaching practice. So all these to come to some reflection questions. Are we approaching CAF in your teaching practice or institution? Are you really going around grammar and pronunciation, or you are having a fluency week in which you lessen a little bit the grammar-oriented feedback and you give relevance to fluency and monitoring people in YouTube videos, monitoring the student by record yourself and listen to yourself. How many fillers do you have? Do you have a pet word? Are you organizing your discourse well? Are you using upgraded language with precision and all those aspects? And the second question that I'd like to pose for you is, could CAF lead to the conception of an institutional speaking assessment framework? Because when we have regular exams or when we have summative assessment, we might say institutionally we work. But when you want teachers to give ongoing assessment every day in little groups, when you want to promote peer assessment, self-assessment, group assessment, are we providing teachers with the concepts to go holistically, or we are still leading those feedback sessions in which we focus so much on grammar and pronunciation, as I said? So to make this a reality, in general, we followed an approach. I guess it's too little for you to see it since it's not full screen, and I'm sorry about that. But let me give you the idea of how we did that. There is an approach that is given by Joyce and Showers that says that if you show teachers theory, they transfer to practice 0. And the skill attainment is around 5%. And the information gets kind of like in the knowledge level. So when you give just the theory, teachers, this is the theory, no translation, that is the theory, then it gets 0% transferred to practice. If you give the theory and you demonstrate it, the knowledge level retention could be 30%. The skill attainment could be 20%, but still it might not be transferred to practice. When you give teachers the theory, demonstration, and practice, you continue increasing that knowledge level to a 60%. The skill attainment is 60%, and there is a 5% transfer to practice. So the final level, the one that we tried to reach, was coaching them, not only giving them the theory, but also demonstrations, but also some practice, and with the supervision system to coach them and give them feedback and listen to their ideas. At the beginning, the approach was super confusing because what is syntactic variety? What is lexical resource? What is this? What is that? But through coaching, according to this framework that is on the screen, we can transfer the theory to practice to 99% of attainment. So what I'm trying to say with this slide is that at any level, theory becomes just theory and is not going to be transferred to practice if there is not that whole process of demonstration, practice, and coaching, and giving feedback and clarifying terms and clarifying what's going on. Just by doing that, is that at the end, all those beautiful theories that we present all the time become a reality in the classroom. And it has taken, let me tell you, around 2 years to really come up to that moment in which teachers are able to say, I can analyze the oral performance of a student, taking into account complexity, accuracy, and fluency, because it's been a good 2 years of demonstration, practice, and coaching. So what are some takeaways that I like to give you about all I have said today? It's important to vary the criteria used to assess speaking in a formative assessment context. It's not like there are a lot of charts and grids and everything about how to analyze grammar and how to analyze a pronunciation, but I feel that it's important to also create charts on how to analyze all those concepts. It's important to bring theory to a coaching level, as I just said. It's important to balance the amount of feedback provided to grammar and pronunciation in relation to other aspects. Basically, that's kind of like the key message of the presentation. Balance the amount of direct feedback versus indirect feedback and other techniques. It's really marked that sometimes as teachers, we listen to a mistake and we start feeling here in our throat that we really want to correct it. Like we listen to a bad pronunciation or we listen to something and our anxiety as teachers like correct. And we get even anxious about it. But we need to lessen that sensation, try to give indirect feedback, analyze fluency. Don't pay attention to that pronunciation mistake. Try to forget it for a moment. Pay attention to the fluency markers, fillers, pet words, and all those things. And finally, translating theory into practice triggers creativity. You don't know how many strategies I have seen from teachers who, once they grasp the concepts, now they have assessment grids, assessment charts, banks of strategies per concept, and things that I didn't even imagine were going to, let's say, appear in this process. So my invitation is for you to try to always, when we talk about speaking assessment, if it's not, let's say, easy to formalize a specific protocol of a speaking assessment, it's important to provide frameworks, whether it's CAF or any other framework, so that teachers know where to stand and they have elements to not only assess, because as you can see, these also derive strategies. So I apply strategies to improve what I assess. Sometimes we do a lot of stuff and then we assess with a grid and with an assessment chart, but did I take my students to that point in which I could assess that? And that was probably the creativity of teachers in this study. That teachers said, okay, you want me to analyze fluency, but I need to find a strategy to take the student there. So let's come up with a chart, let's come up with a strategy. And that's kind of like what my message for today is. There are some references about, I know they're too small, they gotta be too small, but I have my email here is jgalindo at colombobogota.edu.co. If you guys want me to share this presentation with you, or you want to see the reference in a bigger size, feel free to tell me and I will be more than glad to do that. So now I stop sharing so that I can focus on the chat and I can answer a couple of questions.
Well, thank you, Jaime, for your presentation. Let's see if we have any questions from the audience.
Said that they love the Oreo strategy because it sounds like a cookie.
Yes, yes, and
Yeah.
I mentioned that, and definitely, yeah, I want to get some Oreos.
So yeah, well, we get some questions. Well, I can tell you that there are a million strategies, and sometimes teachers have a division between strategies and assessment because we go directly to assessment. We're like, well, let's evaluate. And if we evaluate only grammar and pronunciation, guess what? These strategies will be about grammar and pronunciation. So the fact that you provide a framework makes the strategies focus on what you really want to assess later on, because you are preparing students for that moment. So that's something that I didn't mention, but now I am mentioning it. So you guys, I don't know, I see that there are no questions because people are mostly hungry.
Yeah. Regarding fluency, Jaime Andres, you mentioned, for example, suprasegmentals. Is that something that at the Colombo, and I was a teacher at the Colombo,
I know
we need to start teaching from basic level? Because there is a debate there among, you know, experts and teachers regarding pronunciation and the teaching of pronunciation. And there is this point where you need to be in intermediate level or advanced to start exploring suprasegmental. Some others believe like, okay, we need to start from the very basic level. What do you think about that in terms of fluency? Just that specific question.
Yeah, I just believe that we need to be coherent, and we need to be, let's say, if you are going to, for example, evaluate fluency and you have that concept in your assessment grid, it's fair for the student to get familiar with a couple of fluency linking, let's say, devices. For example, you can teach wanna in basic one, hafta, wanna, hafta. If you include that in the oral assessment of your students, it would be fair for your students to receive the strategies so that they are assessed. And in terms of, well, I feel that pronunciation sometimes is seen as something that comes naturally. For some people, there are different views about it. Like, it comes naturally, it's just with practice. But what I can tell you is that the more strategies we give students, of course, keeping a balance, we're not going to have everyday suprasegmentals in the classroom, but if you keep a balance, if you give us a linking strategy, and then you do a good assessment moment, and the student grasps the strategy and grasps the assessment, there is coherence, and you are being coherent with what you are assessing. If you are going to tell your student you're speaking too slow, that is your assessment, but you didn't provide any strategy, any concept, then you're not being coherent. And you might be over-focusing on grammar and pronunciation without even, and that's what is a little bit ironical, the fact that you overcorrect grammar and pronunciation, but have you taught pronunciation skills or just repetition? Like, let's repeat after me, and then I correct you, but have you seen the IPA? Have you seen suprasegmental? Have you seen those little parts? So that's why I say that we need to be coherent. It's important to be coherent.
Hi, Mendes. Thank you so much. There are actually 3 questions. The very first one is from Astrid. Hi, Astrid. And she's asking, how did the students react and receive this framework? Was it presented explicitly?
No, it was presented explicitly through the supervision system, but it was very confusing. I can tell you that it can be still confusing. I feel that it's confusing because when you receive a new concept, it's difficult to grasp. So you don't see the strategy clearly, you don't see the assessment moment clearly. So that's why it needs to be at the coaching level. And it doesn't happen only with this. And that's the point of that little framework of joys and showers. Anything you explain in a theoretical level will always remain confusing, vague, and you need coaching to clarify and put it into practice. Otherwise, it might be presented 10 times in front of the whole group of teachers, and it won't reach the practice in their classroom. So how did they react? Confusion, questions, and a lot of clarification. That's how they reacted.
All right. Jaime, there is another question from Sofia Gomez. Hi, Sofia, thank you. How about meditation techniques? Do you find them useful and purposeful?
Okay. I feel that fluency has a lot to do with the emotional component of anxiety sometimes. I would say that in our framework, we are definitely missing in that specific part of not only fluency, in general in speaking, the emotional component gains a big relevance in terms of anxiety, and not only meditation, but mindfulness and anything that helps you recognize that you are feeling an emotion that is not easy to control will always improve the assessment, or not necessarily the production and the productive skills. But then we need to be coherent. If we teach meditation, once again, we need to make sure that we have a moment for them to do it before we do the assessment moment, because we might be wonderful at teaching mindfulness, but then in the assessment moment, we don't give time for the student to recognize the emotion and control it. But definitely, I love that idea for an expansion of the assessment model.
Well, Jaime, there are 2 more questions, but I need to start introducing the next presenters. I just want to read them quickly, and maybe you could summarize them so we give these people the opportunity to hear your answer. Diana Peñuela is asking, and hi, Diana, how can we recognize the right moment to assess accuracy, fluency, or complexity? It's a tricky question, to answer that fast. And the second one is from Lilibeth Alvarado. Could you say teachers in your organization following CAF, are able to provide a standard assessment for students?
Okay, for Diana, it depends on the student's needs. The importance is to keep a balance. If you are too much into fluency, too much into complexity, the idea is to keep a balance. Otherwise, the key word there is balance. Keep a balance depending on the student's needs. And for Lilibeth, no, there is no standard assessment for students, but it's more balanced, more holistic, and it focuses mostly on what students need and not what as a teacher I feel I need.
Well, finally, Jaime, it was my mistake. I think Sophia meant mediation, not meditation. She wasn't thinking about mindfulness. That's my bad. I was the one thinking about mindfulness. Sorry, Sophia.
Mediation, yes. If you mean mediation by let's say, being that bridge between the student, the strategy, and it would be, yes, it's actually the same way we coach with theory teachers, they need to coach with strategies students. And those mediations or those, let's say, techniques are really helpful for students. But mindfulness is also good.
Certainly, it is. All right. It is time to finish this session, and I'm very happy to introduce the next speakers. We're not going to have enough time to have a break. So, Jaime, thank you so much again for this wonderful presentation.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much for attending. Thank you very much.
All righty.